What's up, people? Bibisara is playing a very good chess in Norway, especially winning the majority of the Armageddons. And Humpy, by his part, he's playing a bad chess and he's in the last position. At least in the classical game, Humpy defend more or less good the half point against Bibisara. So let's see what happens in the Armageddon. Okay. Bibisara open with d4, d5, c4, e6, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, bishop b7, take and bishop f4. This is a fashion idea. There are no many games here. By the way, scores very good for white. Magnus Carlsen have some games in this position from 2020. Okay, bishop f4, c3 by c6 by Humpy, and now black is not threatening, but black can play, for example, knight h5 if white plays a3, who happened in the game. But okay, h3 is not a move that I really recommend. Okay, it's playable if you want to avoid knight h5, but I think that we shouldn't be afraid about knight h5. So let's see what happened in the game. a3 played by Bibisara, and now Humpy played knight h5, taking the bishop pair. But we're going to see that white can play with the knight too. There is no very important bishop pair here. So Bibisara keep the bishop on f4, playing h3, and say, okay, now if you don't take the bishop, I'm going to return to h2, of course. So black is more or less forced to take the bishop. And now it takes f4, and we had a change in the pawn structure with the d4 pawn now is isolated, and white double pawns in the king side. And added to that, black take the bishop pair. This can look that is better for black, because black take the bishop pair and white have double pawns. But it's not really clear, because now white have more pawns in the king side, so now he have a pawn majority. Okay, black have a pawn majority in the queen side too, but the king side pawn defend very well the white king at the same time that can attack the black king. So this pawn is and of course white have all the pawns in dark squares, and the bishop is a light square bishop. So the position is more or less balanced. Added to that, white have a little bit more development with the knights. Okay, here Humpy play knight a6, which is a typical move in these positions, trying to game to c7 and e6 or to b2 or to e4. Sorry, but here it's not a good move order. Short castle was more normal. Bishop d3, bishop d6, just e3, defending the pawn, rook 8, and king f1. The king is completely safe here, of course. And now knight a6 is one of the main moves. But now this is a good move order. Because okay, now if white takes the knight, white is going to take with into tempos, because she played first bishop d3 and later bishop a6, losing a tempo with the bishop. And black is coming with c5, bishop b7. Added to that, the pawn is on g3, which means that the light squares are more open, and white lost the light square bishop. So here bishop a6 is not a good move. Knight e7, of course, is playable too, going to f8. But the problem of playing knight a6 here is that now, if white wants to take on a6, he's taking in just one tempo. He's not losing two tempos with bishop d3 and bishop e6. And the other important thing is that the pawn is not on g3, and this diagonal is not so weak. But the special is that you are not losing a tempo with the bishop. So bishop a6 here was the strongest move by Bibisara. Because okay, you lost the bishop pair some moves ago, so it doesn't matter if you lose the other bishop. B takes, and now knight a5, attacking the pawn, queen d6, for example, or castle, rook e1, and the black pawns are going to suffer. For example, queen a4, queen b3. And let's see that this square is very good, this pawn is weak, so here white is better. And the bishop are making so much. So bishop takes a6 in that exactly moment was great. Okay, instead of that, Bibisara still with his normal development, not bad for a rapid game. Bishop d6, attacking the pawn, g6, d3, sorry, sword castle, king f1. Here, sword castle have no so much sense, because the king is completely safe on f1, and maybe white can push h4 one day, and the rook will be fine on h1, h4, h5, and try to attack. So, for example, rook e8. I prefer rook e8, because Humpy here playing knight c7, but I prefer rook e8 because, okay, normally in the development it's not easy to think which pieces are going to be first to be developed. For example, here in this position we know that, okay, we should develop the rook, and we should play knight c7 probably. But we should decide which piece move first, and it's a good way to decide to think how many squares have the pieces. For example, the rook have only one logical square to be developed, who is e8. But the knight, okay, most probably that the most probably thing is that the knight is going to be to c7. But maybe we want the knight to b4 one day. If, for example, if white plays queen c2 here, we have knight b4. So, okay, we want the knight on c7, but maybe on b4 could go to b4 one day. Maybe one day could go to c5. So we should develop first the pieces that we have 100% clear that we want the piece in that position, because we have completely clear that we want the rook on e8. So it's better to first move the rook to e8 and keep the knight on a6 more flexible, coming to c7, coming to b4. It's similar like in this position. Here we know that we want the king on g8, the rook here, sorry, the rook on e8, and the bishop on d6. That is completely clear. And the knight, we don't know if we are going to place the knight on d7 or on a6. So first we should develop the pieces that we have completely clear that we want them in that position. And later, after we place these three pieces in the only square that we want to place it, now we should choose between if place 97 or 96. But first, developing the pieces that we have completely clear which is best square. By the way, continue with the game. So, like I said, rook 8 here was better, keeping the knight on a6. For example, knight d4 here was not possible because the h7 pawn is hanging, but wait, for example, g6 first, and now black is threatening knight b6, so we obligate white to play a3. I tell not loss of tempo, but a quiet move, and now knight c7, but forcing white to play e3. Because the problem of knight c7 first is that now white can play just queen c2 without lost the tempo of a3. Okay, it's not going to be decisive, but everything matters. g6, and now king g2. Yes, this is the same position, but without the tempo of a3. Queen f6, and specifically in a position where black have not all his development complete, so the tempos are important. 92, 96, queen d2, and here Humpy made a bad breakthrough. Here she should keep the position just close and maintain everything, for example, with a5. Natural move, just improving a little bit, being solid, h5, or knight g7, maybe. The problem of c5 is that here white have more development and the d5 pawn is going to be weak because this bishop is still with no develop. So white have more development. So this is a bad idea with black to open the position when you are down in development. So now could move by Bibisara with knight c3, going for the d5 pawn. Sorry, d5 pawn. In the previous two moves ago, Bibisara comes to g2, but this is because the pawn is on c6. But now that the pawn return goes to c5, now it's time to go back with the knight here. h4 is interesting. To includes h4 or h5 look like benefits a little bit weight. And now knight c3, for example, or take and knight c3. But okay, knight c3 is a good move, of course. Now Humpy should play bishop f4. That's a very good piece sacrifice by black. That's the best defense. Bishop f4, pawn takes, knight takes, king a2, knight a3, and okay, black have 3 pawns for the piece and white king is exposed, so the position is more disbalanced. For example, king g2, bishop g4, or king g3, pawn takes. This was the better result for black. Sacrifice here the piece, and okay, for a rapid game was a great option too. Instead of that, she played knight d4, knight d5, and here Humpy made a decisive mistake. Maybe not decisive, but he puts in many troubles. Because he played queen e6. I don't like this move because you don't have a square for the queen. Queen d7, you receive a fork. Queen e8, a fork. And you have no more square for the queen, so you have the queen more or less trapped. Okay, she's attacking the knight, but just bishop here. And like I said, the queen have no square. Queen g7 was more logical. Keeping the queen solid on g7, protecting the king, covering f6. The problem is that the queen on e6 is going to have huge troubles. After bishop c4, defending the knight, placing the queen under attack maybe one day, and now a rook is coming to the center. Knight takes, king takes, and here Humpy have only move to still surviving and yes, be in the game, who was b5. That's the only move to still surviving. Rook here, and now sacrifice the queen. That's the only option for black. White still being better. By the way, this was the only black hope, to sacrifice the queen with b5. Instead of that, I suppose that he thought that he's completely lost and he can find the great resource of b5, and he just play g5, trying to escape with his queen after a possible rook here. But just rook e1, queen g6, and just take. And let's see the position. This queen is active, white have all his pieces active, and black have no development. Just knight f6 and queen d6. Good tactic, followed by this checkmate is here Humpy resigns. So great game in the Armageddon by Bibisara, and very bad game by Humpy, who is still in the bottom of the leaderboard, and Bibisara is on the top. So let's see how continue the Norway test with just 4 rounds left in. Bye bye.